You are not allowed to comment on the status of my bed right now. I have substituted a cute quilt for a cozy one, and it's working for me. You're also not allowed to comment on my PLL wall. That's just don't look at it. Just don't look at it. I have not filmed in so long, and I'm so excited to sit down and talk to you guys. So let us get started. Hey YouTube! Not to flex, but I'm somewhat of a hobby connoisseur. I've tried just about everything, and I'm going to tell you the truth about every single one. Okay, here's my definition of a hobby. It's something that should have a learning curve, but also has some element of a sense of accomplishment, self-improvement, and relaxation. I also think that starting off with a new hobby should not be too labor and resource intensive, which is something that I'm going to be looking at while I judge each hobby. Let's begin with something that is extremely popular online: making clothes. It looks so idyllic to me when I see these videos of people who are so talented at this, making amazing clothes that are hard to find in stores and styles that may not be so popular, and that they fit you perfectly and you can choose the fabrics and colors you. On top of that, buying ethically sourced clothes from an ethical store can be quite expensive. So by making a one-of-a-kind piece, you're not contributing to fast fashion, so it's a bit of a win-win as well. And hey, you're making it yourself, so you might save some money. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. Here are my credentials for talking about this. These are two pieces that I have sewn. The last time I looked at these, I was in high school. I made these for my high school exhibition. There's a cape and a dress. And just because I love you guys so much, I'm going to put these on. Oh my god, I forgot I have a mic. Now I've been talking about this dress without using my mic. It's just a red strapless dress. It doesn't quite fit anymore because I'm not the size I was when I made this in 11th grade. I am now 22 years old, so this was made for a 16-year-old. And it's the main thing is the cape. It's a cloak, actually. It has a little hook in the front here, and it has a double layer, and the layer has a lace edge, and at the bottom I painted some gold flowers and pomegranates. Whew. I'm out of breath from just putting that on. But the main feature of this dress is obviously the cape. The cape, I feel like it adds a lot. And I'm not going to get to wear this dress ever again, so I'm wearing it for this video. I made this as part of my exhibition. When I did high school art, I had to create an exhibition, and a lot of my pieces were heavily inspired by Greek mythology. And this dress is meant to represent Persephone, who you may not know is Hades' wife, and she's the goddess of spring and flowers and kind of fertility and all that stuff. And the pomegranates were her symbol, which is why there's pomegranates on the end, and flowers. And she would live half the year on the surface of the earth and half the year in the underworld. And I'm assuming that when she lived in the underworld, she would wear something like this, because that's kind of the vibe, you know, little Tartarus slave. That's what this is that I have on right now. The thing I can tell you about these pieces that I have sewn is that they cannot be worn in public. And however difficult you think the process of making this was for me, it was harder. Sewing machines cost a lot of money, they require a lot of upkeep, they're very heavy, and they take up a lot of space. And buying fabric can be more expensive than just going to a store and buying a dress. Think about it this way. If you buy a dress, that's one cost. Whereas if you make a dress for which you have to buy a lining fabric, a main fabric, perhaps an overlayer fabric, elastic, buttons, fabric scissors, thread, needles, a pattern, zippers, and it just goes on. And that's assuming you have a sewing machine or infinite patience to hand sew, but don't do that. So the startup cost and labor intensiveness of sewing your own clothes is way too high for me to ever have continued pursuing this after I didn't absolutely have to for high school. After that, there's the actual making of the clothes. How do people wear this kind of nonsense every single day? Like, can you keep it together? Okay, I'm only gonna wear it for this segment, then I'm putting my sweater back on. So I see TikToks about experienced seamstresses sewing zippers the wrong way, using the wrong side of the fabric, sometimes avoiding certain buttons and zippers altogether. Why is that? I about lost my mind cutting the fabric into the pattern for this. I think I cut the mirrored pieces the wrong way or something like that. And that was something that I had to do, not even something that I wanted to do. It's not easy. It takes too much learning and practice to actually reach a point where that's enjoyable for you. Before you know it, you're going to be frustrated, 2,000 crowns out of your bank account spent on supplies and fabric, exhausted from how just physically draining it is to cut fabric and just go shopping for all this stuff, and just collecting so much stuff. I hate stuff. Everyone who sews knows about the bag with a capital P. The bag holds all those incomplete projects, all those scraps of fabric you thought that you could make something cute with. We've all got a bag. The bag is too great a source of shame and a sign of my own incompetence for me to not tell you about. I know you already have a bag of some sort. You don't need another one. Now that I've sufficiently warned you based on my own experiences, if you still feel like sewing is something that you want to pursue, here's a few ways that I came up with that I thought it could be a more sustainable and manageable hobby. Number one, if you have access to a free or cheap sewing machine, you'd be surprised how many moms and grandmas just have new sewing machines or almost new sewing machines just in storage or in a room somewhere. There's also thrift stores and Facebook Marketplace, but proceed with caution with weird Facebook Marketplace listings. Number two, if you want to sew using thrifted material, those handkerchief dresses are immediately what come to mind when I think of this one. You can use curtains, you can use tablecloths, you can use bed sheets or pre-existing clothes to upcycle into new clothes. And you can even use them just to practice on before you start making a big project. And this is a great way to get some practice and get the hang of it if you're just starting out. Without overspending and overcommitting to a huge project and the material costs of that. This thing is really itchy. Number three, last thing is if you want to learn alteration. I think that's a great way to get into sewing. Alteration is a great starting point to learn how to sew, but it's also a great goal for your sewing journey. And it allows you to kind of work with what you have. Tailoring the clothes that you've already invested in to make them fit you perfectly really lends them a new life. And it makes you feel so great because your clothes fit you perfect like nobody else's. And as someone whose jeans never quite fit right, height-wise or waist-wise, I really admire and appreciate the skill of alteration. You don't need to buy any materials because you've already got clothes that need altering. And you don't really need a machine either because alteration doesn't require as much stitching. So you can just get started with a thread and needle, really. And I think that's probably the best starting point to see if this is something you want to pursue and invest in. Okay, I'm going to change into normal clothes and then get on with the next one. This is a way for me to keep my mic on without ruining the neck of my sweater. So this is perfect. The second hobby I'm going to be talking about is making jewelry. This is also very popular right now, especially after the Eras tour. And I actually went to the Eras tour night one in Stockholm, and I did not participate in the friendship bracelet trends for one reason and one reason only. Mama, a plastic island behind you. Surely all those plastic beads from all those Eras tour bracelets, hundreds of thousands of them probably based on how many shows there were and how many some people had, they must have accumulated somewhere in the ocean and formed a floating mass the size of Madagascar, which recently found out that was an island. A big fan of their work, but I was not aware of their whereabouts. So now I'm going to show you guys all the jewelry that I've made. This is not all of it. That would take too long, but I'm just going to show you some highlights. This ring that I made out of wire and these pretty green beads, and this is the only closure I could figure out for it. That's not good. Not comfortable either. I made this, which is supposed to be like a little double bracelet that has like a real lock on it to kind of shut it at whatever size I want. And it looks horrible because it's supposed to look like this, like it's supposed to be like little loops all around. But when you wear it, the wire just gets pulled tight and it doesn't look good anymore. Then there's this one. This is probably my most successful thing because it's so simple. And then this one is, I went to a craft fair with my mom and there was a woman there selling glass beads. So I bought these beads and I made it. And I do love this necklace, except this closure. Firstly, it's not perfect, obviously, because I made it myself. This closure is a magnet and it's so annoying. My hair always gets stuck in it. When I put it on, the flowers never lay quite how they lay right now. They look nice. Everything's pointing down, but sometimes it's like all over the place. And the amount of money I probably spent on these beads, I could have bought 3 necklaces for that much. Here's my issue. Jewelry, for some reason, especially cute jewelry, is so difficult to come by. Ugly jewelry, that's a dime a dozen. But for some reason, when you're scrolling and you come across and you see someone make something like this, then you think, oh, cute, I want that. So then you go to buy it, and for some reason, because it's a small business, it's $57. And not to bash small businesses at all. I wish I could afford you. I wish I could support you. I love your work, small businesses in general at large, but I can't. And neither can a lot of people. That's not really bashing them. It's just a fact. A lot of people just can't afford those prices. So you're like, well, I know craft store, so I can buy bead. I don't want to pay 30 euros shipping because I live in Sweden. And for some godforsaken reason, all small businesses seem to be American almost exclusively. But the thing is, this hobby is sustainable if you're going to make these in bulk. I can buy boxes of beads and crystals, and then I make myself a cute bracelet. And then what do I do with the rest of the beads in those plastic boxes? More stuff. I hate stuff. My issue with this, aside from the accumulation of more nonsense in your house that you don't need, is that I don't really want to wear any of the jewelry that I made. There, I said it. Don't act so shocked, please. I know you feel the same way. We're all just too scared to say it, but we have to admit the truth. I've already gone through the pieces I made, and I can tell you this one hurts to wear because the closure is not obviously clean and professional. This one never lays quite right, gets tangled like crazy, and the magnetic closure drives me insane. This one looked cute when I made it, but then when I put it on, it looks like this, so it looks horrible. Look, if you love making jewelry and you find it soothing and you're good at it, that doesn't mean that you should stop. In fact, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to leave it to the experts like you. And the learning curve for jewelry making actually isn't nearly as bad as sewing, especially if you're starting off with simpler designs. The cost is honestly not bad either, and there's jewelry kits available at all kinds of price points and all kinds of styles. But as I try to consume more ethically and buy things that will last me a little while, I can't in good conscience tell you to make jewelry that is uncomfortable, prone to breaking or rusting, and leaves you to accumulate more things than you need. For this specific hobby, I feel that it might be better to just absorb the one-time cost of buying something from a small business and have the piece that you wanted from the start, whether that's from a small business or an ethical brand, and you have something that looks good and that's more wearable and that will last you longer than something you make yourself. Next on the chopping block, reading. This one will be quick. I don't have a ton to say. I believe that reading should not just be a hobby, and it should be a habit that is part of every single person's routine. I believe that the decline of reading habits in the last few years has a lot to do with the lack of empathy that we see in our friends and people around us, the lack of critical thinking that we see in our working spaces and our schools, and the lack of patience in children and young adults nowadays. I believe that less reading is why seventh graders in the school that I work at are reading and writing at a third grade level when I was a kid. BookTok's creation and popularity is an impossible cultural movement to ignore when you're looking at reading culture in the 2020s. The content of the books that are often popular on there is dubious at best, and a separate issue that I can talk about maybe in another video, but I think that some reading, even if it's not really good, I think that some reading, even if it is just a smutty book, is better than no reading or being on a screen. I'm not a believer of the theory that some books are real books and other books are not. And I think that if a young child prefers reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid over the tween literary masterpiece, Percy Jackson and the Heroes of Olympus, I won't judge him. If he instead chooses not to read either series and consume AI brain rot, then I will judge him. I don't read enough classics myself. It's not really something that I enjoy. I am far from a book snob. Reading for me is escapism, and I'm not a book snob. I'm a fantasy slob. I love a curse. I love an overwhelmingly powerful female protagonist who's 5'2" and skinny. And I love dragons and stuff. And reading can be expensive as well. And I know a lot of people joke about buying more books than they can read, or like, oh, my TBR pile keeps growing. I hate that. I think that's sad. It's not really something that we should be laughing and joking about, especially if you give a book that you've bought a bad review, or you don't like it, or worse, you don't even finish reading it because it's so bad. Then what? You're just out the money and you got none of the entertainment and joy from your transaction. And there's more stuff on your shelf gathering dust. I hate stuff. If you want to get into reading, here are my tips. Start with something similar to what you loved as a kid. Now, I loved Harry Potter and I loved Heroes of Olympus, so I started with a big fantasy series, ACOTAR. And from there, I got into other fantasy writers and Sarah J. Maas's other work, which I'm reading Throne of Glass right now, and I do believe that it can compete with the Mahabharata. Don't quote me on that. Like, if you liked Aragon as a child, then you can start with Fourth Wing. I hear there's dragons in that one. I haven't read it. Number 2, basically to sum up, number 1, read what you like. Don't feel like, okay, I'm an adult, so I should be reading Pride and Prejudice. If you've never enjoyed that as a kid, you're not going to enjoy it now. Read something fun, read what you like. And number 2, libraries. I'm very lucky to live in Stockholm, where we have an amazing network of public libraries, and I can pretty much find whatever I'm looking for at some time or the other, and I can reserve books and order books. But even in India, we didn't really have public libraries there, and I still had a membership at the library in the British Council there. So finally, an Indian was taking something from them instead of them taking something from us. But I used to go once a month with my dad, and we would pick out like a bunch of books, and it was a great time. Now, because I've been a library girly since age 4 when I learned how to read, I didn't think the digital books were for me. I was always a bit of a snob, like I need to read the physical books. But when they had a kind of a resurgence a couple of years ago in the pandemic and with BookTok and the rise of the Kindle, I remember that my aunt had a Kindle that she hadn't used in a while, and I was like, hey, do you still have it? And then she gave it to me. Let me go grab it. Here she is. She's at least 10 years old. I think this might be the actual first Kindle that was ever released. It's super old, but it works as good as new. And I'm still a physical book person. I still regularly visit libraries, and I don't really buy books that often just because I can't afford them, but I still read books from the library all the time. I can still highly recommend getting a Kindle if you're getting into reading or if you already enjoy it. I know that there's some other Kindles that are more like a tablet, but I love the fact that this one is so simple and it doesn't feel like an electronic device. Like, I still have to sit in good lighting and with good posture because the screen doesn't have a light source of its own. So I think that that's as close to the page as we can get. And when I moved away to Paris, I didn't have any space in my bags to keep any books because I had to keep the essentials with me. And I read the entire PLL series on this, and it was incredible. It was perfect. And I also read a lot faster when I read on this. If you're a slow reader like me, that might be good. I think Amazon has a free subscription for Kindle books, but I usually stock up on cheap or free Kindle books when there's like sales. Like, there's a couple events called Stuff Your Kindle Day twice a year where a lot of books go for free. So you can just download them onto your book Kindle for free, and then you have them for life. So that's what I have to say about reading. It can be cheap, it can even be free, and it only has positive impacts. And it can be as time consuming as you want. Like, you can be a person who just reads while they're commuting, or you can read 10 pages before you go to sleep every night. Or if you get a really juicy book and you have the day off, you can spend the whole day reading. I think it can really be enlightening and has no negative impact, really, depending on what you're reading, of course. And it can also open up a whole other side of media to you if you haven't experienced books that much. Next up, crochet. I was deep into this one. I'm mostly done with it now, mostly because my hands are getting worse and it really makes them hurt, so I have to stop. And so I'll keep this one short as well. But starting out with crochet, much like any other hobby, it can get out of hand and become quite expensive very easily. And my warnings are that large projects are 10 times more difficult than you think they are. And they're also a lot harder to keep up with than you would imagine. And the resulting products are too flimsy to me, usually for daily wear. And also, they're really hard to wash and care for. Once you, like, it's fun to make it, yes, but once you have it, you don't really want to use it, in my experience. Like, crochet bags, for example, never feel as secure to me as they should. And in my experience of all the things that I've crocheted and tried to crochet, the only thing that I use fairly regularly is this sweater. I saw this multicolored yarn at the craft store and I just had to buy this sweater. And coincidentally, the day I bought it, I had a birthday party to go to in a couple of days, so I really wanted to finish it. And you can see that the stitches are quite big, which means I was able to make it in 24 hours. And I think that's the only reason that I finished it. It was very easy. I can link the pattern, or I can send you the link to the pattern. Just comment if you want it. It's a YouTube video that I followed, and I wear this thing pretty regularly, and it's actually pretty warm. I'm adding it to my stuff pile, along with the jewelry. So crochet actually can be very affordable if you're starting up for the first time. And hook is like 20 to 60 crowns, and then yarn can be very affordable too, depending on what you buy. Some people really get into it and make these amazing things, and it's not difficult to really pick up the stitches. I found knitting to be impossible. I've stopped trying to learn it. I just don't get it. But crochet is really easy to pick up and follow, and once you get the hang of it, you can make pretty much anything. So the important thing to remember with crochet is to start with smaller, faster projects so that you don't end up with a bunch of incomplete big projects, and you don't have 3 sweater sleeves for 3 different sweaters lying in your bag of shame. The next hobby that we're going to talk about isn't really what I would call niche, but it's kind of a newer subsection of hobby that's come up on TikTok. These are alcohol markers and coloring books. To be honest, at first when I saw people doing this, I didn't really like it. I assumed that since the books are independently published and drawn by a small artist, they would be well out of my price range. And this craft kind of felt like the Stanley Cup of crafts, if that makes sense. Because people were buying huge sets with hundreds of markers and then plastic organizers to put those markers in, even though they literally come in a bag to organize them, and just dozens of different books. And no offense, but it felt very American to me. So I kind of didn't really like it, if you know what I mean. So then I thought, well, the coloring books aren't really my scene in general, so let me just try the pens. So I bought a small set of alcohol markers. These are not the Ohuhu ones that the Americans use. those are not super easy to find in Sweden. So these are just the Winsor and Newton ones, and I did not buy a set of 400 colors. Clearly, there's just a set of 12. It has pretty much all the colors you need. You can see over here. And then I also found a sketchbook that's made for markers, so the colors don't bleed through, because I tried on a normal sketchbook and it ruined like 3 pages after it. And I haven't had that much time to spend on this one, but this is what I made so far. I made a frog and a little like kind of playing card with the moon and an apple and some water, a leaf, a koi fish, 2 lily pads, a gradient, a jellyfish, a bow, an ugly tulip, a lighter, and a vine. The startup cost for this can be high, but it really doesn't have to be. It wasn't for me. And I promise you, you do not need 400 or even 48 colored markers. And the Bobby Goods books are not that expensive at all. I might have judged them too fast. Okay, now a side note. When I looked up these coloring books to check the prices, that a few dupe versions of these with similar names and similar vibes are available, but these books are very clearly AI generated, and they're also on sale for the same or sometimes even more than the Bobby Goods books. So if you are looking into getting into this and looking to get the coloring books, please be careful to buy the actual artist's work and not stolen artwork or AI artwork. So that's all I felt I had to let you know about that one. I think that's all from me for these popular hobbies right now. I love hobbies. I love trying them. I love the creativity and joy that they represent. But I also understand that free time is becoming increasingly precious to me as I become an adult, and I'm understanding why hobbies are so important to people now. And life has become the most expensive it's ever been historically. And if me giving you this information and these disclaimers and whatever advice I could give you saves you any sort of time or money, it was worth it. And all the resources I've personally wasted were worth it if I was able to help you out a little bit. YouTube is full of tutorials. Pinterest and TikTok are full of inspiration and the beautiful creations that people have made. But I feel like sometimes we need a little bit of balance and some honesty when we're getting into these new things, which is why I thought I would make this video. That's all for me today. Bye, YouTube.